our Health Buddha. Today, we're going to talk about the fourth trimester postpartum, and we have Dr. Annaleeza joining us today. She has been practicing for many years as a naturopathic doctor, and she's been focusing on helping people getting pregnant as well as the postpartum aspect of things. Dr. Annaleeza, thank you for being here today. How
Thank
are
you so much.
you?
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I'm very good, and I'm excited to chat with your audience about this very important topic to me.
It's wonderful because I was talking a lot about postpartum with some of my patients, and it seems like there's a huge gap in
Mhm.
their knowledge as to what to do because everyone's so focused on getting pregnant and have a healthy pregnancy, especially those people who are first time moms, right?
Mhm.
So, can you tell us a little bit about why we invited you to talk about this topic because I know that you had a very unique story of your own that kind of made you really interested in this type of population.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like when I first started practicing, my patient base was really more general, like women's health and hormones focus. I was kind of treating women all across the lifespan for a variety of concerns. And then in my own personal life, at the time, I was getting married. My husband and I were talking about starting a family. And then that's kind of when I really dove into like the fertility and preconception space. And that kind of like opened my eyes right from the beginning to like the gaps that exist in our current healthcare system and like where there's missing support for patients. And then once we became pregnant, I found out I was having twins, which was like very exciting, but also scary at the same time. And I kind of went
Congrats.
through my own pregnancy journey again for the first time, still identifying like all of these gaps that existed. And then where it really came to the forefront for me was definitely in the fourth trimester and that postpartum stage.
Mhm.
And I think that because of my own experience as a patient, that really like fueled my passion to like be an advocate for these patients and be that practitioner that can help merge that gap just because of my own experience. And I think why my experience ties into this is because even though I felt like I had all of the knowledge, I was really well equipped. I kind of knew the things I had to do. I was a lot more confident going into my postpartum journey than I think the average person may be, and I still
Yeah.
struggle, right?
Yeah.
And that just made me really think from like a bird's eye view of if someone who feels equipped and knowledgeable and has the tools supposedly is struggling, imagine people who don't have the support, who don't know how to advocate for themselves or know the questions to ask or like know the signs that you're not okay, right?
Yeah.
And I think whether you're like a first, second, or third time mom, it's still a relevant topic because every fertility and pregnancy journey is one of its own, right? And I
Yeah.
think that that just made me become really passionate to be that person that can merge that gap because there's so many that exist and there's so much that we can do as naturopathic doctors to support our patients during this time of their lives.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I see a lot in practice, I'm sure you do too, is that when I work with moms and stuff like that, they come in like if I did a great job during
Mhm.
their pregnancy and stuff like that, they
Mhm.
come and see me right afterwards and they're like, "What can I do for myself in order to help myself so that I can show up better for my baby?" So now my question for you is that what are some of the major pillars in your opinions that
Yeah.
moms, it doesn't matter first time, second time, or third time, that
Yeah.
really need to consider to help themselves.
Yeah, and I think that this is what's really unique about like my own my own practice, how the patient journey kind of evolves because we
Mhm.
usually talk about becoming pregnant and then the patient becomes pregnant and then we support them throughout their pregnancy. But during those, I have like very structured visits during their pregnancy. We talk about postpartum a lot, which for a lot of patients, they're kind of like, why are we talking about this already? Like the baby's not even
Mhm.
here yet. And it's because a lot of these foundational pillars that you're asking me about, we actually start to establish at that point, right? Because in the postpartum phase, you just went through a major hormonal fluctuation and transformation. You're like re identifying who you are as a person. You're navigating all of these changes with you, your partner, and your family. And then there's this baby to tend to, and that's your main priority, right? Which, as it
Mhm.
should be, I never want to take that away from anyone. But I think that this is where, as we're preparing for that stage to happen, these foundational pillars kind of have to find their way during your pregnancy. So one of them would obviously be nutrition, but like, what does that even mean? right? The
Mhm.
key in postpartum is that we need to maintain caloric adequacy. We need to make sure that you're hitting your protein goals, whether you're breastfeeding or not, right? And if you're breastfeeding, that kind of adds emphasis to that goal. And we want to make sure that the mom is consuming 3 meals per day in some sort of
Mhm.
routine capacity, whatever that looks like for their life, right? And a lot of this could be like making like batch cooking and freezing meals while you're pregnant and the baby's not here yet. This could be
Mhm.
like adding, when people want to bring you things to welcome the baby, or you have a registry or whatever, adding certain like meal plan gift cards to those registries and things like that. Like it's
Mhm.
just kind of foreseeing what your nutrition should look like and doing all of those changes while you still have the time and space and some energy left, right?
Mhm.
The second pillar for me would really be around like what your support system looks like. And I'm not even talking about caring for the baby, I'm talking about for you
Mhm.
as an individual. And for a lot of people, this means that they need to have, let's say, like a maternal mental health therapist, right? That they're already
Mhm.
working with, that they've already connected with. To like support them throughout pregnancy, but also to support them during that postpartum journey, whatever that looks like. And I think that doing
Mhm.
meet and greets with people, finding the right fit is something that we talk about during pregnancy. So it's already established. And then the
Mhm.
third thing, and this kind of dives into more like the naturopathic modalities inside of things that we can do, is kind of ensuring that we have a plan for lab work assessment, right? Because
Yeah.
pre-pregnancy, during pregnancy, and post-pregnancy, those are
Mhm.
three dramatically different stages. And
Mhm.
assessing things like iron and vitamin D, looking at your
Mhm.
B12, looking at your blood sugar control, looking at your thyroid health, like all of these things should be monitored during pregnancy as well as pretty freshly postpartum, because they are really big predictors of your risks of what your postpartum journey could look like, right? And this
Sure.
could totally influence what your supplement routine looks like postpartum, or like the other type of support that we might need to intervene with. So I would say that those three things would be my main pillars. And kind of going back to that support team would also be like, do we need to involve a pelvic floor physiotherapist? Should we
Mhm.
have an osteopath on board for you and baby? Right?
Mhm.
Are we
Mhm.
getting massage therapy treatments during pregnancy, and do we want to continue that postpartum? So we have that conversation around building what your foundational nutrition looks like, assessing you through blood work to determine what your specific care routine has to look like, and then developing that healthcare team to support you with the baby. Those would be my
Yeah.
foundation for sure.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I work with a lot of pelvic floor physiotherapists as well as myself. I am trained in pelvic floor for women who are like, during pregnancy and post-pregnancy. So one thing that it's a very interesting shift because I hear a lot about like pelvic floor physio is now a buzzword, right? On TikTok and all that type of
Yeah.
things. And then so what the society has done for that profession is that they brought awareness. Like family doctors, even like gynecologists, are sending people to pelvic floor physio even prior to them actually going through this journey
Mm-hmm.
of pregnancy
Mm-hmm.
and delivery, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
postpartum is definitely something that they do. So, what I find lacking, where it's not necessarily lacking, it's more like, diet and health support, that type of situation is not necessarily always a part of the jurisdiction, at least in
Mm-hmm.
Ontario, for
Mm-hmm.
physiotherapists to
Mm-hmm.
really support the patients through. But they see a huge volume of patients like postpartum. So
Yeah.
that's where naturopath really comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about the diet, I know that a lot of people they're like, oh, I used to have a workout routine. I stopped as soon as I get into postpartum. I used to have a diet routine and I stopped. So in that sort of way, can you speak a little bit more about like what are some of the things that you can do for to make sure that the moms are like actually eating, actually getting their life back together? What are some maybe even what are some of your favorite tips and tricks about food, nutrition, that type of things that people can, just take from your interview today with me and then just kind of run with it tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's a really big question, right? And I'll
Yeah,
dive
it
into
is.
it as much as I can. But I think the biggest theme that I want to mention is a lot of things that we can do postpartum is prevention, right? So during pregnancy, we talk about all of these nutrition principles and movement goals and all of these foundational pieces to kind of set you up for success. But I think the biggest thing would definitely be the realistic expectation, I guess, is what I want to say, to understand that if you don't feel okay, it's okay not to feel okay, and it's okay to ask for help, right? And that's a lot easier said than done. And that's for anything. That's for help with the
Mhm.
baby, help to prep your meals, help to make sure that you go for a walk that day, whatever support looks like for you. We really talk about that realization of understanding that the guilt feeling will come up a little bit, like feeling like you don't deserve to take time for yourself or that you feel guilty for doing that. We talk about that a lot and kind of that mindset shift, because then when you actually have to implement those goals, it's a little bit harder because now you feel tied to this baby, of course, right?
Mhm.
So I would say nutritionally, and this is the same during pregnancy, we focus a lot on the Mediterranean style diet principles, right? So focusing on 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal. And when we talk about protein intake, we really want to diversify our protein sources. So from animal and plant based. We really focus on fiber intake as well, both for our gut microbiome and also blood sugar control. So aiming for about 30 grams a day there. And this could be used with like flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp hearts. There's a lot of these like hacks that we can use that are still considered whole foods but can help achieve those goals, right? Going back to the protein, obviously batch cooking and meal prepping is a great option, but utilizing things like hard boiled eggs, hemp hearts are really high in protein, using high protein Greek yogurt, right? Like those are just some examples where you don't feel like you have to always have a chicken breast at every meal, for example. Obviously, fruits and vegetables, but really focusing on dark leafy greens and berries because they're super high in antioxidants. And then when it comes to healthy fats, right, consuming things like nuts and seeds, making your own trail mix as a snack, using avocado, using olive oil to cook with and to use as salad dressing, for example, utilizing a lot of fatty fish, right, like salmon or sardines or herring or what have you, because of the omega-3 fatty acid content. So I think that we focus more on what foods to include as opposed to what foods to eliminate because I want us to view food as fuel, especially during this time. And then I think from like a movement, or I'll call it movement or physical activity instead of exercise, because exercise makes it sound like you have to like commit to it 100%. There's a lot of really cool research that even shows that within the first 12 weeks postpartum, even walking 20 minutes a day can improve mental health scores significantly, right? And it's not even
That's
about
right.
the weight loss piece, right? It's about your mental health and it's also about prevention for cardiovascular risk. And even just walking for
Mhm.
20 to 30 minutes a day has shown that significant improvement. And obviously, getting out with the baby counts, right? Like bring the baby for a walk, get exposed to that sunlight, help support your circadian rhythm, help boost your mood. I feel like 20 to 30 minutes of walking is pretty feasible for most people, depending on where you live and what season it is, as opposed to committing to a 1 hour workout 3 times a week, right? It doesn't have to
Mhm.
be that big of a goal. And then, of course, when it comes to like sleep and things like that, we have to get a little bit creative because we're tending to a newborn. And that's again where that like direct support from a naturopathic doctor can help you. But from like a nutrition and movement standpoint, that's usually where I would begin. And those are like the few takeaways that people can kind of start doing tomorrow, even if you're not postpartum
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. And
yet.
it sounds like you actually have a kind of like a plan that you move people through. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's
You
wonderful.
got it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. One of the things that I want to ask you,
Mm,
if you don't mind sharing,
mm,
is that when people are having some issues, right? Like we talk about guilt is such a big one for mental health for
yeah,
that population.
yeah.
But the other thing is anxiety. Anxiety and depression. Postpartum is often referred to as depression, but sometimes it also come out as anxiety for some moms as well,
Yeah.
right? So what are some of the resources, if you don't mind
Mm,
sharing, for
yeah.
people who are met with, like, say, colicky babies, or having
Mm,
feeding issues, or having
mhm.
like constipation, or even sleep? You talk about sleep too. So other than, well, of course, like also introduce a naturopathic way as well. But what are some
Yeah.
of the resources that people can even reach out for those type
Yeah,
of issues?
definitely. I like speaking. The mental health piece is a really big one, right? Because again, this is where we
Hmm.
want to be preventative. Like even in my pregnancy visits, even from the beginning, I do something called the Edinburgh postnatal depression scale. And I do it as a baseline and I do it continuously throughout pregnancy into postpartum because it can kind of give us a gauge on like if we think that anxiety or depression is kind of developing, right? And there's so many risk factors that we could identify that would put excuse me, maybe at like a higher risk category that we otherwise wouldn't have known, like being low in iron, low in vitamin D, having a thyroid condition,
Hmm.
having a previous mental health disorder, having a
Hmm.
complicated pregnancy, and the list goes on and on and on. And this is why that integrative care is so important. And I think that doing that assessment can give the patient even an idea of when to ask for help, right? This is where I often will work collaboratively with conventional and medical practitioners to advocate for referrals to different therapists or use of medication if necessary, right? This is where we do have a lot of herbs that are even safe while breastfeeding that can help support healthy mood balance postpartum. This is where we talk about different community groups and mom resources, Facebook groups, in-person groups, using something like a lactation consultant if feeding is an issue and referring patients to them, utilizing our naturopathic visits to talk about the mom, but also any issues with the baby, like if they're colicky, figuring out why, helping their digestive system, supporting their constipation, supporting all of those things so that the mom doesn't feel like she's navigating all of these decisions on their own. And I will provide for this talk like my postpartum handout that I've curated for exactly that, like kind of highlighting all of these things that we mentioned today, so people at least have a go-to of some of these goals and some of these ways to tackle those goals. But yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for providing that resource. That's going
Mm-hmm.
to be such a big help for a lot of our listeners, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, one of the things that we'd like to wrap up with
Yeah.
always is that
Yeah.
we ask people, if you can create a superfood that can
Mm-hmm.
help women with this issue, what magical health benefit would it
Oh, yeah. When I had to think
have?
about this, it was really tough. And I think that this comes from my personal experience, but also all of the conversations that I have with my patients. If there was something that we could take that could like make us feel a certain way, it would be to like never feel a tremendous amount of self-doubt or like be too hard on yourself when things don't go as planned, and deeply feel like you're doing your absolute best during this extremely vulnerable and influential time postpartum. Like if I could give someone one thing to make them feel that way, that would be my go-to for sure, because that's often the theme that comes up and often where we
Mhm,
spend most of our visit, right? Not even talking
mhm.
about food or exercise. We're really just talking about mindset and kind of navigating the evolutionary and societal expectations of how we're supposed to be, but how we actually are. So
Yeah, that's right. Because mental health actually plays like a negative cycle in a lot of those, like if you want to exercise or like not even exercise, if you want to move, right? Or if you want to
100%.
eat better or show up better, like
Yep.
that just plays such a big role on how a person actually can function. So
100%.
I love that. I love that answer. So, all right, Dr. Annalisa, thank you so much. If the audience wants to connect with you, want to work with you, how can people find you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram. It's at Dr. Annaleeza Caputi ND. My website's also the same, drannaleezaCaputiND.com. And then you'll find all of my information, all of my resources, and where I practice and all of that information.
You're located in Ontario and you're
Yes.
open to virtual appointments if they're not physically in your vicinity. Is that correct?
Yes,
And
definitely.
where are you?
So yeah.
Yeah. And where
Um,
is your physical location?
I have a physical location in Port Credit in Mississauga at the Root Natural Health Clinic. I also work in Guelph, Ontario at Natural Choice Medical Clinic, um, in person at both locations, but also seeing any patient virtually across Ontario.
Perfect. Thank you
Hmm.
so much for being here today, and hopefully we'll get you in for a different topic in the future Lunch and Learns. I
Definitely.
appreciate your time, and you have provided so much resources for our audience today, and we'll chat next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a wonderful day.